Okay, here is a video that goes through all of the logarithms on our math lib worksheet. So I'm going to first work these quickly and then I'm going to slow it down to help you if you didn't understand the first time. So right away we can look and see that we have a 6 in front of this log base 4. So that means that our 6 is a power because it's a star on the ground. So we need to throw it into the sky. So this becomes 2 to the 6th. And we can see that we have a subtraction sign, and so subtraction means that we divide the first number by the second number. So we can write that quickly as log base 4 of 2 to the 6 divided by 8. And when we put 2 to the 6 over 8 in our calculator, we find that this is log base 4 of 8. Okay, now, if you found that confusing, let's go back and do it one at a time. So first, let's look at the first log here. So the 6 has to be a power of 2. So we're going to rewrite this as log base 4 of 2 to the 6 minus log base 4 of 8. And so we have a subtraction here. So that means that this number is divided by this number. So we have log base 4 of 2 to the 6 over 8, which is just where we started up here. Put that into our calculator, log base 4 of 8. For our next problem, we have two powers and they're separated by a plus sign. So that means that when I calculate the number for the first log, I can multiply it times the number for the second log. So it's going to look like this. This first number becomes x to the 5th power, and the second becomes y to the 7th power. So I'm going to take both of those numbers and multiply them together, and I'm going to end up with the log of x to the 5th, y to the 7th. Okay, let's go back and do them one at a time. So the first one, I get log of x to the 5th plus the second, which is log of y to the 7th. So now I have two numbers being separated by a plus sign, which means multiply. So we're going to end up in the exact same place, log of x5, y7. Okay, the third logarithm. So let's look at the numbers that are in the parentheses here. I've got 4, log base 2 of 4 plus log base 2 of 16. So plus means multiply. So I'm going to take the 4 and multiply it times the 16. And then I'm going to take that to the 1/2 power. So 4 times 16 is 64 to the 1/2 power. You can type that in your calculator, or you can recognize that 1/2 is a square root. So square root of 64 is 8. So this whole first number here is log base 2 of 8. And this says minus log base 2 of 2. Minus means divide. So it's 8 from the front divided by the 2, which gives us the result of log base 2 of 4. Okay, now let's go back and do it a little bit slower. All right, give myself a little bit more space to write here. So the first thing I'm going to write is just what's in parentheses. So the plus sign means multiply. So I'm going to end up with the 1/2 on the outside, and 4 times 16 is going to give me log base 2 of 64 minus log base 2 of 2. Okay, so this is now my exponent. It's my star I'm throwing up into the sky. So my first logarithm becomes log base 2 of 64 to the 1/2 power minus my log base 2 of 2. So you can take 64 to the 1/2 power and enter it into your calculator, and it will tell you that the answer is log base 2 of 8. I still am subtracting my log base 2 of 2. Okay, so what does a minus mean? It means divide. So this becomes log base 2 of 8 divided by 2, because it's the first number divided by the second number. So this gives us the result of log base 2 of 4. Okay, for this one, let's look at what we've got here. We've got a plus sign here and a plus sign here, and then I have a power and a power. So plus signs mean multiply. So the first logarithm up front, I can't do anything to that, so the 6 is going to stay the same. So in my second log, I've got x and a power of 2, so that's going to be x squared. So I'm going to write this above. My first, I've got 6. My second, I've got x squared. And my last one, I've got 9 to the 1/2 power. And 1/2 power is the square root. So the square root of 9 is 3. So all of these being separated by a plus sign means multiply. So I can write this as the log base 3 of 6 times 3, which is 18, x squared. 18x squared. Okay, now if you didn't get that, I want to make this smaller and write it out a little bit longer hand. Okay, so my first logarithm, log base 3 of 6, I'm just going to leave alone. My second logarithm, the one that has the 2 in front, that's my star on the ground I'm going to throw into the sky, so that's going to be my exponent on my x. So I have the log base 3 of x squared as my second term. And then my third term, I've got a half on the ground that I'm going to make my exponent for my 9. So log base 3 of 9 to the 1/2. Okay? Now, I have simplified it all I can before I multiply. So because all of my signs are plus signs, that means that all I have to do is multiply this number times this number times this number. But before we do that, what is this number? 9 to the 1/2. You can put that in your calculator, and your calculator will tell you that it is 3. Okay, so when I get to the multiplication, I'm just going to look up here, and I'm going to pick the 3 instead of the 9 to the 1/2. Okay, so we're going to rewrite this as log base 3 of 6 times x squared times 3. Okay, so that can be simplified by multiplying our 6 times our 3. That's going to give me log base 3 of 18x squared. Okay. Okay, so if I'm going to do this one fast, I'm going to go through and write my terms right above this logarithm. So here I'm going to put a to the 5th because that takes care of that power, and b to the 3rd, and in the front, a to the 4th. And then I'm going to remember that this negative sign means divide, and this positive sign means multiply. So let's take care of the division first. So I'm going to have the log base 7 of a to the 5th divided by b to the 3rd. And then in front here, I still have to worry about this logarithm. So the term is a to the 4th, and this plus sign means multiply. So that means I can just add it to the top of this fraction because it's being multiplied. So I can just put a times a to the fourth right here, and then that's going to simplify by adding my exponents. So this becomes log base 7 of a9 divided by b3. Okay, now let's do it a little bit slower if you found that confusing. I'm going to draw a line right here. Okay, so let's work inside the parentheses first. Let's write 4 times the log base 7 of a plus 5 log base 7 of a minus 3 log base 7 of b. Okay, so let's take care of our exponents first. Let's take care of all the exponents. So our exponents, remember, are these numbers that are on the ground, the stars on the ground in front of our logarithms. So log base 7 of a to the fourth plus log base 7 of a to the fifth minus log base 7 of b cubed. Okay, now remember that minus means divide and plus means multiply. So that means that we're going to rewrite the term inside the parentheses as the first term divided by the second, and then we're going to multiply the first term times this result. So I can just put the a to the fourth right there, and when I multiply a5 times a4, it becomes a to the ninth. So I have log base 5. Oh, somewhere along the way I changed that to a 5. It's 7. Sorry about that. This should be 7. We should not be changing our logs. Okay, a to the ninth divided by b to the third. Okay, this one says expand this logarithm. So what we need to remember is that these two numbers are separate and they can be separated. So how do we separate them? Well, we have to ask ourselves, what are they doing to each other currently? And they are multiplying. So we learned in our properties that if two logs are equal in base and are separated by a plus sign, that we can multiply them. So that means that we can separate two logs that are being multiplied and write them on the same base. So we can write these as two separate logs of base 5 and put a plus sign in the middle. So let's do that first. I have log base 5 of x squared plus log base 5 of y. All right, so at this point, we can now look at the exponent. So this exponent is our star in the sky that we're going to lasso and bring to the ground. So let's put it in front of the first one. So 2 log base 5 of x, and then add our second log base 5 of y because that's all we can do. And there we are done. Okay, for this logarithm, we have a number where the whole thing is being raised to a power. So first we're going to put that power on every individual number inside of this log. So let's rewrite this as log base 3 of 4 squared x squared divided by y squared, because that square being attached to the parentheses the way it is, it means that every term is squared. So let's square the 4. So we have log base 4 of 16x squared divided by y squared. Okay, now let's recognize that 16 is its own number and x squared is its own number, and so is y squared. Okay, so the y squared being on bottom, that means that the log that is attached to y squared is being subtracted because it's dividing. And then the two logs on top are being multiplied, so those can be added. So we can write this as a log of base 3 because you have to keep the same base as the original logarithm throughout the whole problem. So we're going to continue with base 3. So log base 3 of 16, and then we're going to add log base 3 of x squared because those two numbers are being multiplied. And then we're going to put the y squared term behind a subtraction symbol because it's being divided. So let's put minus log base 3 of y squared. Okay, now we have one more thing that we can do. We have to realize that here's an exponent, here's an exponent. So when we expand, we pull the stars out of the sky. So let's just leave the first one just like it is, log base 3 of 16. Let's pull that 2 down, so it's going to become plus 2 times the log of base 3x minus 2 log base 3 of y. Okay, so for this logarithm, what you have to remember is that anytime that you have a radical with a number other than 2, that the power is a fractional power and this number is on the bottom of the fraction. So if this had been an x under here like this, then we would write this as x to the 1/3. So whatever the number in the index is the bottom of the fraction in the exponent. If this had been 4, the root of 4 of x, then we would write this as x to the 1/4. If it had been the 5th root of x, it would have been x to the 1/5. Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, let's erase all this. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this radical and get rid of it by writing the exponent as a fraction. Because even though we don't necessarily like fractions, we like them a lot more than radicals. So let's go ahead and put the 9x to the 4th inside parentheses. And instead of having that radical with the index of 3, we're going to put a 1/3 here. Okay, so remember our power to a power rule means that we multiply exponents here. So this 1/3 in the position that it's at, it means that it applies to the 9 as well as the x. So the power of the 9 as it is 1. So when we do power to a power, we multiply the 9's current exponent, which is 1, times 1/3. So we get the log of 9 to the 1/3, and the x becomes 4 times 1/3, which is 4 divided by 3. Okay, so at this point, you can see that you have 2 separate numbers. Here's one number, and here's your other number. So we can separate those out into 2 separate logs, and since they're being multiplied, that means we're going to separate them with a plus sign. So we're going to have the log of 9 to the 1/3 plus the log of x to the 4/3. Okay, now here's your stars in the sky. Let's pull them down and put them on the ground. So you're going to have 1/3 log 9 plus 4/3 log x. Okay, so here's another power to a power rule. So before I do this, I'm going to go ahead and take care of the power to a power by just multiplying these exponents. So let's rewrite this as log base 8 of m to the 5 times 2, which is 10, and n to the 3 times 2, which is 6. Now, we have our 2 separate numbers here, and they both have exponents. So we can separate these with a plus sign, and we're going to pull those exponents out front. So we can write this as 10 log base 8 of m plus 6 log base 8 of n. Okay, here is another radical. So that's going to give us another fractional exponent. So let's take care of this root 4 and rewrite it. So we've got log base 2 of c to the 10 d 16 to the 1/4 power. Because that's what root 4 is. It's 1/4 power. Okay, so we have to multiply our exponents. So log base 2 of c to the 10 over 4, because we multiply the 10 times the 1/4, which gives us 10 over 4, and then d to the 16 over 4. Okay, and both of these will simplify. So now we're going to have log base 2 of c to the 5 seconds and d to the 4th. Okay, so just like our previous problem, here's two numbers that are being multiplied, and they also have exponents. So we can separate them with the plus sign, and we can pull those exponents down front. So we're going to have 5/2 log base 2 of c plus 4 log base 2 of d.